For master painter Daniel Smith, it's a labour of love. Hand paint.
In theory, the interests of businesses in Newcastle's CBD are represented by the City Centre Committee. The group was set up to provide a unified voice for the CBD, and its membership is made up of councillors and business people. It's funded by an extra rate charge on businesses and a council contribution from general rates. But Council has decided to withdraw its $134,000 contribution. It's now a matter for the business community whether it wishes to go it alone. Committee member Paul Murphy says the decision is politically motivated.
There's been some things that we've been outspoken about that the council's disagreed with, and they've thought, well, we'll probably wrap these boys over the knuckle and the girls and make them pull their heads in a little bit. But I think if anything, it'll make us stronger.
Current management of the committee says abolishing the body will lead to fragmentation and duplication of purposes among smaller groups. But some businesses are delighted with the announcement, saying they never got value for money. Rose Cogger, who's lobbied against the activities of the group, says she's received hundreds of letters from disgruntled businesses who support her cause.
It's been a very expensive process. The rate went up 85% last year for 2/3 of the landlords in the city, and the landlords are saying that they don't want to pay that levy anymore.
Council will vote next week on how business interests will be represented in future. Laura Saperstein, NBN News.
It's one of the biggest and most sophisticated amphetamine laboratories uncovered by police in the area. This Duralong house had been converted to an amphetamine factory, the operation so well established that it took police all night and into today to make the area safe and dismantle the laboratory where the drug was cooking. All the while, the Fire Brigade's Hazardous Materials Unit was standing by in case the volatile substances exploded.
There's always a possibility of toxic chemicals and inflammable chemicals being present in the premises, which may explode on even the flick of a light switch.
Daylight revealed the extent of the operation. Some 25 litres of the drug were found cooking in the bathroom. The shed was also being used to store large containers of chemicals. The rest of the house contained only the bare essentials. It's believed this batch of amphetamines was almost ready to be distributed, and police say its value on the street would have been around $1 million. While police were continuing their search of the rented property, 39-year-old Kim Knight and 37-year-old Debbie Phillips of Sydney appeared in Wyong Court, charged with manufacturing the drug and conspiring to supply it. Police say they are still searching for a third person. It's believed neighbours had complained to police about the strong smell of chemicals coming from the house. Police don't know how long the factory had been operating, but say the setup was extensive.
Multi-million dollar operation obviously being undertaken in a very small rural community.
Newcastle ratepayers have already paid their levy to have a curbside recycling service, which was expected to be operating before the end of June this year. However, Councillor John Sutton says Newcastle Council has been told it won't be up and running this year.
The latest information that we've had is that it's unlikely to be up and going within 9 months, and I've got real doubts about whether it could even be delivered in the following rating year.
Councillor Sutton says it's an embarrassment for Council. He's critical of the calibre of advice provided to councillors.
My view is that we're receiving inadequate advice. We should have been told about this a long time before the meeting on Friday of the Waste Management Task Force.
Councillor Sutton has written to General Manager Bill Grant asking for the new target date, an explanation for the delay and why the problem wasn't foreseen by council staff. In the meantime, he says residents will have to struggle on with either taking rubbish to the Summerhill waste facility or leaving it at nominated drop-off points. The General Manager was unavailable for comment. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The second full day of competition in Targa, Tasmania for 1996 has seen crews tackle the mountain passes of the east coast of Tasmania. And Toyota driver Neil Bates in his Celica GT4 has opened up a 4-second gap on arch rival Jim Richards in his $300,000 Porsche Turbo. Bates took command on the twisting mountain passes, the Celica's all-wheel drive traction coming into its own. Stephen Johnson, son of ace racer Dick Johnson, in his Mazda RX-7 is now third, just ahead of another Queensland crew of Guy Beddington in his Mazda RX-7. New Zealander Mark Parsons, in a Triumph TR7 V8, is now in 5th place. Day 3 of competition is tomorrow, taking crews south of Hobart in a loop, finishing back in Hobart tomorrow night.
Just ring, give the information anonymously. We're only too happy to talk to them.
It's been a hard season for Breakers skipper David Lowe, but facing the wooden spoon is perhaps the toughest battle.
Well, I'm not too happy about it, to be honest with you, but that's the situation we find ourselves in.
And if history means anything, the game against Wollongong City at Breakers Stadium tomorrow night means Newcastle is in trouble. The club has never beaten their Steel City rivals. Both sides are currently sitting equal last.
I don't think it'll be anything other than a full-on 90 minutes of going hell for leather to avoid the wooden spoon.
For first-time National League coach John Kosmina, the season has had its successes, with youngsters like Clayton Zane and Troy Halpin coming through the ranks. But Kosmina has already spoken to some new players to boost playing strength for next season.
Locals alone aren't going to make the team successful in the very near future. In the long term, yes, you will, but we do need to get some experienced players up here.
As the sun cast its first rays over the water at Foster Keys, some 1,000 competitors, the biggest field yet, were often racing in Australia's premier triathlon event. The first to emerge from the 3.8 kilometre swim was Spot Anderson from the Gold Coast, followed by a strong contingent of fellow Australians. Seventh out of the water, California's Wendy Ingram put in an exceptional swim to lead the women, with 7 times world Ironman triathlon champ Paula Newby-Fraser close behind. The Aussies lost their momentum in the cycling, defending champ Holger Lorenz and fellow German Jürgen Zach turning the race into a 2-man decider. In the women's, Newby-Fraser powered into the lead halfway through the 180-kilometre cycle leg. The Ironman triathlon was blessed with perfect conditions, sunny skies and a cooling breeze that came up as athletes entered the final leg of the race, the marathon run. The gruelling 42-kilometre marathon saw Zach pull away from Lorenz. Gaining a 6-minute lead, it was a euphoric Zach who crossed the finish line in a time of 8 hours, 20 minutes and 25 seconds, the third fastest time in Australia.
I think I had a good race. I didn't have to go all out and the support of the crowd was fantastic.
As expected, Zimbabwe's Paula Newby-Fraser, the fastest Iron woman ever, was the first woman home in 9 hours and 20 minutes, beating defending champ Wendy Ingram by 6 minutes.
In a mistake-ridden first half, it took a familiar dummy half dart from Tony Hutton to produce Newcastle's first points. before prolific try scorer Mick Reed stood up his opponent for a 12-4 lead. Veteran Paul Upfield made the defending champs' defence look just as brittle, and when Western crossed in the final seconds of the first half, they'd snatched a 16-12 lead. But the visitors were punished in the opening minutes of the second term, Brett Cullen swooping on an error to level the match. Again, Western responded, a penalty goal coupled with the experience of Upfield and Priest, allowing them to post their third try through replacement Darren R.C. Enterprising play from Ken Kerr went unrewarded, Hutton venting his frustrations. They heightened when Western foiled another Newcastle raid, the intercept indicative of Newcastle's afternoon as RC raced away for his second and the country championship. For 5 years, Nobbies has held the mantle as Newcastle's and the nation's premier IRB club. But with retirements imminent, that could all change, as a young, enthusiastic crew from Kays Beach is set to knock their idols from their perch.
For years they've looked at Nobbies as the untouchables, and over the last year we've actually started to beat them and have them looking over their shoulders at us.
Well, we're a lot older than them, they're a lot younger than us, so they've got to catch sooner or later.
Bob Hunt is one of several who could be competing in his last Nationals and wants a fourth title to keep Caves at bay.
They're doing the work and they're getting the results, so good luck to them and I hope we beat them.
Meantime, Scott Weavers, Stuart Adams and Kevin Kutcher were just 3 from Newcastle to qualify for the Hawaiian Ironman following Australia's event at Foster. Weavers was the best placed Novocastrian, finishing 17th in 9 hours and 16 minutes, but is unlikely to go to Hawaii. His wife Rebecca also completed the course, as did all 46 entrants from the Newcastle Triathlon Club. And in rugby union, the Wildfires have obtained another recruit in Sydney Uni halfback Stuart Woodhouse. Coach Keith Gollan had no hesitation in rushing him into the side to play West Harbour this Saturday. The club's Fijian contingent is expected later this week.
Council has given a guarantee that the old Frederick Ash building on Hunter Street will be preserved, with the Westpac Bank expected to move in. But it's what's known as the new Frederick Ash building in Burwood Street behind the Council Administration Centre that's under threat.
Our council does need extra office space. We have staff in a number of buildings now, and that's inefficient.
While Lord Mayor Greg Hees admits there is vacant office space in the city, he says it's not up to standard. He wants a new 6-storey block, but says extra tenants would have to be confirmed before it went ahead. But local residents are calling for the building to be refurbished for inner city living.
We've got a lot of accommodation for commercial purposes in the city vacant, and we now need residential on that site.
Council will look at the options when it meets tonight. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
This is the sort of form that had rally champion Neil Bates looking in his rearview mirror all last year. Michael Guest may have lost that battle, but he set himself a whole new challenge for 96. The new paint job not the only change to his new Mitsubishi Lancer.
We've gone into a different class this year. Last year we ran a very high power Group A car. This year we're in the production class, so we can compete in some of the World Championship events and try and get a good name for ourselves with some of the overseas teams.
The first of 9 rounds brought disappointment for Guest when he had to pull out of the Melbourne Rally when a $2 engine sensor failed. But with only the 6 best performances counting, Guest has a real chance of pegging back the leaders.
This is a Mount Gambier rally, which is of course in South Australia. It's extremely fast roads, reaching speeds up around 220 kilometres an hour consistently, and it was an event that I was leading last year before a rear diff failure. So once again I'm confident, but I don't want to be too confident.
They emerge from the darkness to carry the torch for fallen friends. Veterans from World Wars I and II, Malaysia, Korea and Vietnam answered the early morning roll call to attend Newcastle's dawn service. With the dawn service over and the sun slowly rising, attention turned to catching up with old mates over a breakfast beer. A traditional Anzac breakfast and morning rum helped to ignite old friendships at the Hamilton RSL.
Well, you meet old friends, perhaps you haven't seen for 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30 years. And renewing friendships is what it's all about, and keeping your friends.
Bernie Williams and Clive Merrick have been getting together every year since the end of World War II. Bernie travelling from Queensland to keep that tradition alive.
I can't express the love of one man for another unless he has been to war and fought in battle.
Late risers caught the morning march along Hunter Street. The creators of the Anzac spirit cheered on by those who will inherit the tradition. As a preterm baby, Chloe has a 1 in 10 chance of contracting RSV, a respiratory condition that's relatively harmless to adults, but potentially serious for babies.
Bronchiolitis is a condition nobody's heard of until their child gets it, but it's due to a particular virus, and it's a very important cause of chest disease in children in the first year of life.
But there may be some hope for parents of preterm babies, with a new drug that promises to fight the infection.
An international company has manufactured some nose drops which the babies will have every day during the winter season to try and stop them from contracting this RSV infection.
Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital has joined a worldwide study into the effects of the drug, with 40 of the 500 babies to participate in the 4-month trial to come from the Newcastle area. Half of the babies will receive harmless saline drops, the rest to be administered with the infection-fighting nasal drops. If the trial succeeds, it could be a major step forward in the treatment of the disease.
It would be a major breakthrough. This would really revolutionise the treatment of chest disease in children less than a year of age.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News. At Port Stephens, the local war heroes marched through Nelson Bay, cheered on by hundreds of supporters. Visitors from the Bay's sister town, Bellingham in Washington in the US, marched beside the Aussies. At a moving ceremony at Memorial Park, the men and women who gave their lives were remembered. Highlighting the tragedy of war, 17-year-old Rowan Andrews placed a wreath for his father, a Vietnam vet, who died last year from complications dating back to that war.
He's a really good father, and
I guess you miss him.
yeah, very much.
It was also a day when the Aussie larrikin could stand up and be counted. Two-up games were played at most pubs and clubs. Our diggers are famous for having a bet, and with a few drinks under their belts, their worries were left far behind. It's been a day when the people of our region have prayed and played together. In the Anzac spirit, the heroes of Australia's battles will never be forgotten. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The 24-year-old woman from Williamtown was in a serious condition when the Westpac helicopter arrived in Foster to airlift her to the Prince of Wales Hospital in Sydney. The woman had been diving at a spot called the Pinnacle, 6 kilometres off the coast at Foster, when she ran into trouble just after 10 a.m. At 24 metres deep, the woman apparently tried to remove hair from her mask, but when it filled up with water, she panicked and lost her air regulator.
And a dive buddy who was adjacent to her has put a regulator back in her mouth. There's been a bit of trouble, so they've ended up going a little bit deeper, and then she's ascended to the surface at a very quick rate.
The woman was unconscious when she surfaced. The other divers said it was unusual for such an experienced diver to panic in that situation. They believe she may have suffered slightly from nitrogen narcosis when she sank down to 37 metres.
Where the maximum depth is recommended is 33 metres. Generally narcosis has minimal effect, but sometimes a bit of effect on people. Maybe it clouded her judgments, made her a bit edgy, a bit panicky.
Simone Cobb, NBN News.
It was billed as the Anzac Cup between two bitter enemies, Newcastle in the red and black strip versus the high-profile Sydney side. Newcastle gained the early lead and it seemed an extra leg. Ben Lane was pushing for more points at one end and the Newcastle keeper, Peter Oberhauser, was having a blinder at the other. Sydney equalised with a goal from Peter Suzor, taking it to 1-1 at half-time. Into the second half and the game was tied down to a battle of survival. Newcastle's Mark Jones tried his heart out. Wayne Bailey just missed with a header and the locals lost their first half magic. Sydney scoring the winning goal with just 5 minutes to go. "16-year-old Chris looks like he's just won lotto."
Couldn't believe it. It's like unbelievable. I wasn't expecting to go at all. It was like, a total shock. And Mum was stoked and I was stoked and it was unreal.
Yeah. A student at Belmont High, Chris was selected by teachers to try out as a state representative for the closing ceremony at the Atlanta Olympics. After a gruelling audition, he made the 26-strong student group.
It's the handing over of the Olympic flag to Sydney, which is the next Olympic city. So it's just like a formal ceremonial thing. Yeah.
Chris's theatrical skills were a distinct advantage. He has performed in Starstruck for the last 4 years. The audience at the Olympics should be a little more intimidating. It's estimated more than 1 billion people will be looking on. Peter Ryan, NBN News. Toronto has been under the planner's spotlight for the past 6 months. On the Foreshore Reserve, the idea is to introduce a boardwalk and new bed and breakfast accommodation.
And we've said, OK, let's not look at single issue studies. We've said, let's do a master plan for the whole of Toronto.
Heritage studies have been carried out on the rail corridor and work done on future commercial development in the town centre.
What we're not wanting to see is a haphazard development driven simply by market forces. What we're interested in is seeing the attractiveness of this town centre maintained.
With little government money around, Lake Macquarie Council is looking to private sector involvement to take these plans through to reality. The Toronto Town Centre strategy is on show for public comment until June 5. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
It's the little details of war that bring home the awful realities Australia's service people were forced to endure. A cigarette case with a bullet through it, a rifle loaded and cocked that was never fired.
Look, it's tragic. There are parts where you get a lump in your throat. The child's mourning dress from 1916. What happened to the people when they came back?
The exhibition at the Newcastle Regional Museum is the culmination of 2.5 years' work. It examines World War I through the eyes of Hunter service people and features never-before-seen memorabilia. There are pieces here of touching intimacy, sitting side by side as they did 80 years ago with brutal instruments of death. Visitors will also get a close-up look at what frontline life was like. It's one thing to read about what it would have been like living in the trenches, but it's quite another to experience it firsthand. And you can do that here. Also featured are the often forgotten women of war, including nurses decorated for their bravery in the face of horror.
If there was a battle raging, they would actually be in the operating theatre or in the ward for 48 hours at a time. It was just constant.
The exhibition opens this evening. Laura Saperstein, NBN News.
Despite their tough guy image, these men on their mean machines were riding from Gateshead to the foreshore for a good cause. Donations of tinned food and blankets were packed on the back of the bikes and delivered to Salvation Army officers. For the first time in the 4-year history of the charity ride, the sun shone. The Salvation Army will receive all the goods collected just in time for winter when demand is at its peak. Organisers say this ride is meant to complement the toy ride, which is also run by biker groups.
So that the Salvation Army could get more tangible donations, tin food, blankets, stuff that the kiddies could really use. It's not in competition with the toy run, but it's just a supplement.
It's hoped next year's run will attract corporate sponsorship. Amanda Bolger, NBN News.
A popular victory for local punters, with Mick Dittman and the Chief putting in an excellent trial for the Stradbroke. It returned 280 and 150, with Monopolise and Gold Ace filling the minors. South to Sydney, where the Daily Telegraph Walter was one of the features. A big win for the Northwestern Tamworth trainer Tim Martin, with a 4-year-old by switch in time starting at 9-2. Ainscough hasn't played with the Knights for 2 weeks after damaging his ankle against the Tigers. He was past fit to play for City Origin yesterday, and with those commitments keeping him from club training this week, coach Mal Riley has stuck with the Grogan-Godden centre combination.
I found it difficult to sort of leave one of those out at his expense when he's not involved this week anyway.
The only other change to the squad is the inclusion of utility forward Troy Fletcher on the bench. He gives the squad extra depth, which may be needed as 5 players, including forwards Harrigan and Muir, are involved in the City Country encounter on Friday night. Making way for Fletcher is Robbie McCormack. The coach has been happy with his performance, but feels he hasn't been getting enough opportunity in the top grade.
I suggested that he go back and then get some time on there and we can assess the situation from there.